We were being ripped off by almost every single country in the world had some massive surpluses. China had hundreds of billions of dollars in surpluses with the United States. They rebuilt China. They rebuilt the army. We built China's army by allowing that to happen. I have a great relationship with President Xi, but he respects our country now.
That's President Trump reacting after the Supreme Court struck down his emergency use of tariffs on Friday. He announced initially a 10% global tariff, which was then raised to 15% the following day on Saturday. The ruling, a new tariff creating some uncertain trade relations with China as well. The president will visit Beijing beginning March 31st to meet with Xi Jinping on a potential extension of the October trade truce. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, imports from Taiwan were actually higher than from China at the end of 2025. It's the first time that's happened in decades. Beijing further ramped up the pressure for the United States to end its arms deal with Taiwan. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that some U.S. officials are worried that approving that sale would derail the trip to China. Joining me now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, thanks very much for weighing in on this. And it feels like President Trump is balancing here ahead of his trip to China. He's trying to placate some worries from Xi Jinping, but also going to China with strength that he always does with the United States. How is he managing this upcoming trip to China?
We'll see, Maria. Remember, Keir Starmer, before he went to Beijing in January, he green-lighted China's mega embassy. And the reason the reporting is that Beijing forced him to and said he couldn't come to Beijing if he did not let the embassy go forward. So trying to placate China in a run-up to a summit is not necessarily a good idea, because when Keir Starmer got to Beijing, they humiliated him in various ways. So I hope that President Trump stays tough on all of these issues, including Taiwan and technology, because they're important. They give President Trump something to bargain with, and he shouldn't give that away before he goes there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, he may want sort of a, calm and conflict-free backdrop when he gets to China. But after the meeting, that's when we'll really know how the meeting went, depending on what President Trump does.
Yes, and I think that that's important. If you look at the substance of what President Trump has been doing with regard to China, he's been hitting the Chinese very hard. So, for instance, Venezuela, Panama, all sorts of issues. But when it comes to things like technology, he has not confronted the Chinese in the way that I think that he should. So, for instance, his Commerce Department is not prohibiting data center operators to install Chinese-made equipment in those centers. And that equipment could let the Chinese steal data as well as control those data centers. And they're critical for the future of the United States. So there are things that I think President Trump needs to do in the run-up to that meeting. And I think if he does that, he'll have a much better result than Keir Starmer did.
Well, you make great points all around, Gordon. The president, meanwhile, extending a Board of Peace invitation to two of America's largest adversaries, including China. Watch this.
I know that China is going to be involved, and I think Russia is going to be involved. I think they will be. I want to have everybody, get all sides, because it doesn't help when you have all sides with one ideology. You have to have everybody together for this. But we work together to ensure the brighter future for the people of Gaza, the Middle East, and the entire world.
This after a week of heightened tensions with Iran, Iran holding joint military drills with Russia. Gordon, your reaction? The president gave the Iranians up until early March, I believe, to do a deal. But time is running out, the president said this week.
And China has warned the United States not to attack Iran. The important point here is that in the Strait of Hormuz, you have Iranian, Russian, and Chinese vessels, and they're in close proximity to America's two aircraft carriers that'll be on station soon, one of them already there, plus a number of other American ships. And so when you have those ships in very near to each other, that's, of course, a dangerous situation. But we obviously have to do something about the Iranian regime. It's not only got its nuclear weapons program, it's got its missiles, and it's slaughtering the Iranian people. Tens of thousands reportedly executed. So there's got to be something that the United States does, especially now that we've marshaled all of those naval and other military assets very close to Iran.
Well, China has information about the positioning of U.S. assets, and that's information that it could share with Iran. I mean, there are partnerships there. And so I wonder how helpful China is to Iran in this very sensitive moment.
Iran could not have assaulted Israel on October 7th were it not for Chinese support.
Right.
And yes, the Chinese have publicized the location of American military assets in the region, which mean Iran has access to it. This mirrors what China did in the first weeks of the Ukraine war in 2022, when it shared critical intelligence with the Russians, and they were able to use that lethal assistance to take out Ukrainian drone operators. So
yeah,
clearly China is supporting the Iranians with, by the way, advanced radar systems, which have just been shipped to Iranian territory.
Unbelievable. All of this in the backdrop ahead of President Trump's meeting March 31st with Xi Jinping. India, meanwhile, becoming the latest nation to join a U.S.-led group aiming to counter China's influence in new technology, AI, and rare earth minerals. The president is planning a new Peace Corps initiative, which would send thousands of recent American science and math graduates to boost foreign reliance on American AI rather than China's, Gordon. You wrote about this for the Gatestone Institute. Quote, trade surplus countries such as China have little ammunition in trade wars. They are the ones with everything, their surpluses, to lose. Trump should remember that the next time he refuses to keep out China's Trojan horse products and services. Gordon, tell us more.
Yeah, the important point here is that over the last several months, we have seen some disappointing decisions from the Trump administration allowing Chinese tech into the United States, where I believe that the United States should have been imposing restrictions. Also, the Trump administration has allowed the continuation of software to China and, of course, the H200 chips of NVIDIA, where he's green-lighted the export licenses. These are things which go to the issue of the AI leadership, and we just cannot surrender that to China.
Yep, understood. Gordon, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, Gordon Chang joining us. Quick break, and then we've got a lot coming up. Stay with us. We'll be right back.